In this lesson, we're going to learn how to graph a line given its slope and y-intercept. And so one of the things you have to remember about the idea of a slope is this. So slope can be defined as rise over run. So when we do these examples, we're going to look at the idea of rise over run. And then remember the y-intercept is the point on the y-axis, where the graph, or in this case the line, will cross line where, all right, so the point on the y-axis where the graph crosses the y-axis. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and look at an example. So our first example, let's look at this one. Suppose that the y-intercept is, and let's say the y-intercept is 6, and the slope is -4/3. All right, so the y-intercept is 6 and the slope is -4/3. So I want to graph that line. I want to graph a line that has that intercept and has that slope. All right, so one thing you got to remember is that to graph a line, you need 2 points. To graph a line, you need 2 points on the line. You need to know 2 points on the line. All right, so to graph a line, you need to know 2 points on the line. Now remember, the y-intercept is one of those points. All right, so remember, the y-intercept is a point on the y-axis where the graph crosses the y-axis. So the y-intercept is one of the points. You just got to find the other point. And to find the other point, you're going to use the idea of slope, which is rise over run. It's a very simple process. So let's look at an example. Let's look at this example. We're going to use a graph paper to do that. All right, it always helps to use graph paper because it's scaled properly. All right, so this is going to be number 1. And remember, the y-intercept is 6, and the slope is -4/3. All right. Okay, so listen carefully to this. So remember, to graph a line, you need 2 points to graph a line. I know one of them. One of them is the y-intercept. So let's go ahead and plot the y-intercept. So the graph's going to cross the y-axis at 6. So here's one of my points. Yeah, at 6, right here. So on the y-axis. All right, so remember, the y-axis goes up and down, and the x-axis is horizontal. All right, and remember, the point, the point where the y-axis and the x-axis intersect is called the origin. Okay, so that is helpful at times. All right, but at least you know 1 point, right? So one of the points is a y-intercept, which is 6, so make sure you put a dot there. All right, now to find the other point, remember what I'm about to say. All right, so remember, slope is rise over run. Okay, slope is rise over run. And in our case, the slope is -4/3. So that means that my rise is -4/3 and my run is 3. So my rise is -4 and my run is 3. All right, now the negative and positives is going to affect how we graph this line. So remember, one of the things you learned is that if the slope is negative, the line falls from left to right, right? So let's go ahead and write that down. Let's make a note of that. Since the slope is negative, the line falls from left to right. Okay? The line falls from left to right. So meaning that when I graph this line, it better do something like this, right? So it's got to fall from left to right. So as I go from left to right, the line falls. Remember, this is increasing, right? The line rises. The line rises. In this case, here, the line falls. All right, and remember, this is horizontal. Remember that? That's horizontal. And then this is vertical. All right, so all of those ideas are very helpful as you learn these topics. Okay, so we know that our line has to do this, right? So if you do something like this, you know you made an error because the slope is negative. All right, so here's what it's going to do. So remember, rise rise, when you think about rise, I'm going to go ahead and put that here. So rise means you're going to go up or down. Okay? Rise, you're going to go up or down. So remember, that's pretty simple, right? Rise, go up or down. Run, you're going to go left or right. Run, left or right. So remember, rise, when you think of rise, think going up or down. When you think of run, left, right, like you would prefer to run on a flat surface. Okay, so rise up and down, run left, right. All right, so that's going to be helpful. Okay, now so let's talk about how do we know whether to go up, or how do we know whether to go down, or how do we know whether to go to left or right. Right. So let's talk about that. All right. So notice my rise is negative. All right. So always when finding the other point. When finding the other point, always start at the point you already know. So I already know my y-intercept. I already know one of my points. So from this point, I'm going to do my rise first. So since my rise is negative, I'm going to go down 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, down 4, excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now don't put a dot there, all right, because you still have your run to deal with. All right, so my rise is negative. I go down 3 since it's negative. Down is negative. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's where I'm at. Now don't put a dot there, all right, because that's not that point. So remember, the point, in order to get that second point, you have to look at your rise and your run together. All right, and then my run is a positive 3. Since it's a positive 3, I go to the right 3. So positive, go to the right. 1, 2, 3. And there is the other point. All right. So this is the point right here. If you're asked to label it, which sometimes you will, remember when you're asked to label a point, you need an x and a y coordinate. So my y-intercept is 6, which means that my x coordinate is 0 and my y coordinate is 6. All right. So my y-intercept is 6, means x is 0, y is 6. Because remember, that's what y is, right? Y is 6. So notice it's in the y place, y coordinate. All right, and over here, the coordinates of this point, remember to label the coordinates, you always start at the origin. So I'm going to go to the right 3 and then up 2. So that'll be 3, 2. So x is 3, y is 2. All right, so x, right, left, y, up, down. So positive 3, up 2, positive 2. All right, and then all you do now is draw your line. All right, and don't forget to do that. Some students think that all they have to do is just plot those points. Remember, you're graphing a line, so a line has an infinite number of points. You just found 2 of them to help you graph that line. So just draw the line the best you can. You use a straight edge. It helps if you use a straight edge. All right, so let me go ahead and make sure I have this in the right place. All right, and always remember, a line, you have to have arrows. Remember from high school geometry or middle school geometry, you have to have arrows there, okay? All right, so there's the graph. There's number 1. All right, so let's look at another one. Now remember, it helps again to notice that, hey, since the slope is negative, my line better fall. All right? Okay, so let's look at another one. Let's look at number 2. I'm going to put number 2 on a graph paper. So here's number 2. So number 2, this is number 2. Number 2, let's say number 2, my y-intercept is 1 and my slope is 5. Okay? Y-intercept is 1, slope is 5. Okay. So remember, to graph a line, you need 2 points. To graph a line, you need 2 points. All right, so I need 2 points. I already know one of my points. Remember, one of your points is at y-intercept. That's the point where the graph crosses the y-axis. So the graph crosses the y-axis at 1, right here. See, that's 1 right here on the y-axis, right here. So let's put a dot there. So there's one of my points. All right, now to find the other point, I'm going to use that slope. Now notice the slope is positive, right? So let's make a note of that. So let's remind ourselves. All right, so note, since the slope is positive, the line rises from left to right. Okay, so that's one of the things you learned in a previous lesson. So when you graph the line, it needs to do something like this. It needs to rise, right? Okay, so that's always helpful to know this about the slope. All right, now what confuses students is this. So when they think of rise over run, they think of a fraction. And they say, well, I don't see a fraction here. Well, you don't see it, but you know that you can write this as a fraction, right? So remember 5, I can write as 5 divided by 1, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So my rise is positive 5 and my run is a positive 1. And that's all you do. And so now my rise is 5 and my run is 1. All right, so rise is 5, run is 1. All right, so remember what you do now. So to find that other point, remember you must always go back to one of the points you already know. And in this case, I know my y-intercept is one of the points on the graph, on the line. So let's start here. All right, now remember, rise is positive 5. Remember, rise meaning goes up and down, right? Rise up and down. It's positive, so that means from here I go up 5. Positive up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now don't put a dot there. Leave it there for right now, okay? All right, so just put your point over it for right now. Now my run is a positive 1. So remember, run, you go right, left, correct? Right, left. So since my run is positive, I'm going to go to the right. All right, so let's do this again. Positive 5, positive 1. So up 5, right 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then to the right 1. And so there is that other point. Okay? And so now you found your 2 points. So let's go ahead and label those points. So this is 0, 1, and then this point here is 1. Remember, from the origin, go to the right 1, and then up 6. So it'll be 1, 6. And now don't forget, though, remember you're drawing the line, right? So you have to go ahead and make sure you don't forget to draw that line through those 2 points. And so there's my line. So remember, a line has an infinite number of points. You use these two to help draw that line. All right, so that was number 2. Not difficult at all, right? Very simple process. All right, number 3. So number 3, your y-intercept is negative 3, and the slope is a positive 2/3. So notice positive, you know it's going to rise, correct? Okay. Now remember, to graph a line, you need 2 points. So you know one of your points. So one of your points is this y-intercept. So that's at negative 3. So let's go ahead and put a dot at negative 3. So here's where negative 3 is. Let's put a dot on negative 3 on the y-axis. So there's one of my points. Now remember, to find the other point, you're going to use the slope. And always start at the point you know. Some students, they make a mistake and they start at the origin. That's not true. Okay, you start at that point that you know. All right. So my slope is a positive 2. So remember, since it's positive, you're going to rise. And my run is, I didn't mean the slope is a positive 2. I meant the rise is a positive 2 and the run's a positive 3. Let me go ahead and write that out. So slope is rise over run, and that's 2/3. So my rise is a positive 2, right? And my run is a positive 3. So since my rise is a positive 2, I'm going to go up 2. So notice from this point, I'm going to go up 2. 1, 2. See that? So I'm right here. Now don't put a dot there. Okay? You got to use the run to help you as well. So my run's a positive 3. Since my run's positive 3, remember, run, you go left, right. So since it's positive, you can go to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. So this is where your other point is. All right. And notice when you draw a line, it's going to rise. Sometimes they're going to ask you to label, so make sure you label this correctly. Remember, to label that point, you always start at the origin. Go to the right 3, down 1. So that's 3, negative 1. So this point, remember, is in the 4th quadrant. So remember your quadrants: quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. All right, and this point here is 0, negative 3. That's the y-intercept. And then draw your line, and you got it. Not a difficult process. Very simple to do, right? Very simple to do. Okay. All right, so always remember, the slope is positive, so you know when you draw your line, it needs to rise. Okay, so let's look at number 4. So number 4. All right, so number 4, the slope is a -3/2, and the y-intercept is -4. All right, so remember the slope is negative, so your line's going to fall from left to right. So it'll look something like that, since the slope is negative. All right, now the y-intercept is -4. So I already know one of my points. Remember, to graph a line, I need to know 2 points. So the y-intercept is always one of those points. Because remember, the y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So it crosses at -4, so let's go ahead and put a dot at -4 right here. All right, and then remember your slope. Remember the slope is rise over run, and my slope is a -3/2, so -3/2, right? And so my rise is a -3, and my run is a +2. All right, so from this point right here, from this point, you're going to rise -3, right? Now remember, since my rise is negative, that means I go down 3 from this point. So let's count. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Now my run's a +2, which means I go to the right 2, right? So 1, 2. So there's your other point right here. And notice when I graph it, it will fall. So it will fall from left to right because the slope is negative. All right, and let's go ahead and label this. Let's get in the habit of practicing labeling points. So this point here, if I start at the origin, that's a +2, -7, right? So that's in the fourth quadrant. And then the y-intercept is going to be 0, in this case, -4. And then draw your line, and you got it. So it's not difficult. Fairly simple process. A fairly simple process. So draw the line. Don't forget to draw arrows. It's very important that you draw those arrows. All right, so the arrows just implies that it extends in both directions. All right, so notice I drew this line. So this line, remember, the line has an infinite number of points. I use these 2 that's on the line to help me graph the line. All right, that's number 4. All right, very simple, right? Not difficult. All right, let's look at number 5. So number 5, the slope is a +5/3. Hey, it's positive, right? So you know it's going to rise. So keep that in mind. You know that fact. And you know that the y-intercept's a -5. Now remember, to graph a line, you need 2 points on that line, right? 2 points. All right, so the y-intercept is one of those points. So let's go ahead and plot the y-intercept first. And so the y-intercept is -5, so that means the graph's going to cross the y-axis at -5. That's what that means. So right here, okay? And I'm going to use the slope. Remember, the slope is rise over run, right? And my slope is 5/3, so +5 divided by +3. And so my run is a +5. I'm sorry, my rise is a +5, and my run is a +3. All right, now remember, to find the other point, you're going to start at the y-intercept, at one of the points you already know, okay? So I know one of my points. One of my points happens to be this y-intercept. From that point, you can use rise over run to help you find the other point. All right, so from this point, my rise is +5, meaning you go up. So from this point, notice I'm counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm at the origin, right? Now don't put a dot there because you haven't used a run yet. Now my run's a +3, so I go to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. So my other point is on the x-axis. And remember, I'm going to talk about this in a little while, but just to let you know, this point here that's on the x-axis is called the x-intercept. This is a y-intercept. This is the x-intercept. And the reason is because that's where the graph crosses the x-axis, and that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. All right. So there's your graph, right? So remember, the slope was positive, so you knew it had to rise. And so you're going to use the slope, rise over run, 5 divided by 3, to help you find the other point. So from this point, from the point you already know that's on that line, you go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're at the origin. Don't put a dot there because you haven't used a run yet. And then you go to the right 3 because 3 is positive. And there's your line. Not difficult, right? Let's go ahead and label this. The y-intercept, you're at the origin, should go straight down. So since I did not go left right from the origin, that's 0. I went straight down to 5, so that's a -5. And then for this point, the x-intercept, notice for the x-intercept from the origin, I went to the right 3, but then I stopped there, right? I didn't go up or down, so that means my y value is 0. All right, so that's number 5. Not difficult at all. Very simple process. All right, let's go ahead and look at number 6. We'll do one more, number 6. All right, so here's number 6. So you have that the y-intercept's a +5, and that the slope is a -1/7. -1/7. All right, so remember to graph a line, we need 2 points. So the y-intercept is one of the points I know. So let's go ahead and put a dot at 5, +5. And remember the slope is negative, so your line's going to fall, right? So the line's going to fall. It'll look something like that. All right, now notice I have that negative in front of that fraction. And many of the other problems, the negative was part of that numerator, but I have it in front. And the reason I did that was to remind you of a couple of things. So remember, if you have a -1/7 that looks like this, just to remind you, this is equivalent to -1 divided by 7, or 1 divided by -7, right? So it's equivalent. -1/7 like this is equivalent to, say, -1 divided by 7, or 1 divided by -7. All right? So just keep that in mind. So to find the other point, I'm going to use the slope, and it does not matter whether you say -1 divided by 7 or 1 divided by -7. I'll show you. I'll do it both ways just to show you. So we know that the slope is rise over run. So let's go ahead and use -1/7 for the first one. -1/7. So my rise is a -1 and my run is a 7 in it. All right, so from this point, from the point you already know, which happens to be the y-intercept, you're going to rise -1. So since my rise is negative, I'm going to go down 1. So right here. So notice 1 right here. And my run is a +7. So that means I'm going to go to the right 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right here, right? Okay. Now I want to show you, and then you would just go ahead and graph the line. But I want to show you this. So suppose someone else said, I'm going to use 1 divided by -7. All right, no problem. You can do that. Does not matter. So remember, regardless of which one you use, the points, all those points have to lie in the same line, and it will. So watch what happens. So if you use 1 divided by -7, again from this point, from the y-intercept, my rise is a +1, so I'm gonna go up 1, and then my run is a -7, so go to the left 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's that other point. And notice, it did not matter whether you use this one or whether you use this one, because when you draw the line, they all lie on the same line. It did not matter. Did not matter at all. See that? Did not matter. Okay? And so that's it. So that is, if I can find that first page, that is how you're going to graph a line given its slope and y-intercept. It's a very simple process, not difficult at all. All right, so that'll be the end of this lesson.